This is Colin Shanks. He's the Commodore of the Yacht Club. Thanks for letting us have some time here today to speak to you. We've just done a small PowerPoint on presentation, so I'll just kick off with that. So the main thing here is just to give you a picture of what the Yacht Club is using in the, as part of public land. So we have the Yacht Club building, which is at number 89, and the ramp access is the dark circle, red, and GDC also has an access way, public access way that was put in probably 8 to 10 years ago, and the dotted portion there. Just going back, so the ramp itself it's only a small area. Do we have a pointer on this one? Oh, there it is. So the ramp, the actual concrete ramp is only really in that area there. The rest is really access way. So the next photo shows you the access way from the Tairawhiti Beach Road to the ramp, and that's the area that we're wanting to see if we can get maintained. It's just another shot of it down looking the other way. So the red area is the access way to the ramp. That's sort of the poor condition it is. So the some of the rainfall and runoff from Tairawhiti Beach Road actually flows down that access way to the sea. There's no actual drainage anywhere around there. Now this is the difference between the access ways from the GDC ramp on the the right-hand side, which pretty much always has soft sand. The access way for the on the GDC, on the Yacht Club side, has quite a lot of hard sand because the concrete ramp extends probably around about there. It doesn't extend that far onto the sand, but it gives a better access way for users. So we've done a little bit of a design here of what could happen if the access way was upgraded. We believe there's potential for a few more car parks there. Just to give you a bit of history of the ramp and that was put in, so that was all put in by GYC Yacht Club members, and it started off as being a wooden ramp, and then we got the access way concreted, and it was really only used for Yacht Club members, and there was a gateway chain across so that it was only for Yacht Club users. Probably 20 or so years ago at least. Is that right, Colin? No, 30 years ago. We opened it up to all users, to the public. So that whole area, we have a lease from the GDC that runs for another 2 or 3 years. I think it goes till 2021, 21-year lease. So the problem we're having is that we believe that the maintenance of that road should be undertaken by the GDC rather than the Yacht Club, because it's used predominantly by the public. We believe that we use the ramp itself probably only about 5% of the time, and the public uses it the balance of the time. The next slide is just the ramp users that we believe use the ramp at the moment. So we only use it for small boats. We don't run vehicles down there at all, and that's been the case all along. So the deterioration in the quality of the surface there is mainly because of the public access with vehicles. And as you know, vehicles are getting heavier and heavier, so that's causing the bricks substructure to be slumping and potholed. So there's, you see there, kite surfers, windsurfers, surfers launch small boats to go and surf out at Tairawhiti. Small power craft, so quite a lot of users probably up to maybe 30 horse motors would can launch their boats there in good conditions. Canoeists, kaimoana, rescue boats can use that as an access because it's a quicker access point to further out in the bay and obviously the general public. So our use, the GYC, we tend to use it Sundays only during the season, which is generally speaking October through to April. So it is predominantly used by the public. So it's just a bit of a summary. Majority of the users prefer the GYC access as the concrete ramp extends further onto the beach where the sand's more compacted. We don't use the ramp access that much. We've allowed public access to the ramp for many years. The original access way was not designed for motor vehicles, but it's now predominantly used by motor vehicles. Tairawhiti Beach is becoming more popular as a safer beach to swim at. It's great in low tide, and we see a huge amount of people down there. It's getting more and more popular each year. And if we wanted to go back and look at sealing some additional areas here, that would sort of fit in with the other areas that have recently sealed for the freedom camping and the likes, which was this area here. So finally, thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak today. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free. And thanks also to Larry Foster for making us come up here and present this. So that's great.
Thanks, Richard. Councillors, any questions? Larry.
Thank you, Richard. Do you see the deterioration of that entranceway being more prolific over the last few years and into the,
I would say probably over the last 5 years. Yeah. Obviously, you live in the area, you've seen it.
Yeah.
And what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. The other question is, do you think it's going to last in its current state for years to come? Or is the deterioration going to be a real impediment to access to the beach?
Yeah, that is our main concern, Larry, is that because the pavings were actually put in by hand by the volunteers of the yacht club 50 years ago, never intended for that, and now they are actually sinking. So it's going to get worse. And probably 5 years, we have really noticed it because it has become quite a popular place to launch now. The public never used to use it as much 5, 10 years ago. They never used to use it, but now they're aware of it, they use it. So, and we have no problem with the public using it. We're just making you aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you for your presentation. Just for my own knowledge, when you're, I heard you say that now people are using vehicles and things like that to launch. How do you not use vehicles to launch your yachts either? I'm trying to marry up.
No, we launch on just little beach trolleys. And just
right,
push
hand
them by
pushing
hand.
them.
Yeah, so little trolleys with wheels about that high, probably weigh 100 kilos maximum with all the gear on it. So that's our launch. And our rescue boats, we actually push the trailers in by hand as well. So we don't use vehicles on that. And it was really probably never designed to have vehicles on it.
Thank you.
I have a question. Have you approached council staff before about this issue?
That's a good question. We have put in a request for service on those, trying to get that done, but the council staff said, well, it's leased to the yacht club, so it's your responsibility. But notwithstanding it is leased to us, the area is predominantly used by the public, and we don't mind that. No issue. And it is a public asset, so we can't determine what happens there.
Councillor Cranston and then Councillor Wilson.
Are there any aspirations to do anything with the channel itself as to, you know, is there any sort of aspirations that that could be extended, which would encourage more use rather than less use? Is that something that has been discussed at all?
Well, we haven't discussed that at all. I know that it's a letter to the editor in the paper last night about that issue, which that's not come from us. We're reasonably happy with where it is at the moment. There is probably one rock that's halfway in the channel that would be nice to get rid of that, but that's usually a challenge more for outside people than people in the yacht club. But you know, as far as you know, in the future, I suppose that's possible, but we've certainly got no plans for that.
Last question, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Richard, you talked about the lease before. What does it say in the lease as to who is responsible for those works?
I had a quick look at the lease last night, and it just said it had to be, the property had to be maintained. But I suppose looking at that whole lease area, we leased from there's the main yacht club building, and then there's a shed at the end of it, so we leased that whole area there. But I'd say out of the ground area, we're probably only using building-wise 20% of it, but the rest is still all completely open to the public. It's not fenced off or anything like that. And you know, we are paying rates and rent and every other charge that GDC puts on us.
Madam Chair, could we just ask that the screen be put back so they can show us what area they do lease and what they use? Just one, it only takes a moment. No, we just have to have that turned off.
Can I just say one of the other things that is quite important for everybody to understand is that the charitable rescue boat trust owns 2 rescue boats that are used for emergencies. I'm actually on the board of the rescue boat trust as well, and part of the agreement is that we are available on call for any rescue. This ramp would be the fastest point of call in any emergencies, and our large rescue boat, although we probably wouldn't retrieve the boat, we can launch it from that area, and from opening the shed to get the boat out, the boat could be in the water in 10 minutes, way faster than any response from the inner harbour. So it's something that the public should be aware of.
Thank you.
Right, so the lease area is from there right through to that building here. That's a storage shed for small yachts. So that whole area there.
Thank
We
you.
also have a rescue boat shed over here, separate lease from the council. We also use this, which was Sea Cadets building that they don't use any longer, for storing small yachts in that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for coming to talk to us. Look,
Okay.
Public deputations, councillors are only allowed to ask questions.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, may I welcome Tuta and Kaylee Narimu and Nono Aston. No mai haramai, welcome to the Gisborne District Council. We look forward to listening to what you have to share with us today.
Kia ora, e te whare tēnā koe te whenua tēnā kōrua, koutou katoa, kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. I'm Tuta Ngārimu, and beside me is someone that you may not have met, Mona Aston. So our presentation today is around ethics policy. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and why we feel and what we think, how crucial and important this ethics policy is for our community. So, Antinona will begin and I'll sum it all up.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for the privilege of standing here. I'm speaking to you as leaders of my life, and that's what you are. And personally, I think you're doing a bloody good job. That's what I think. So don't take the knockers, they're everywhere. Just make our community great, like Trump, you know, and you are. But we do have a dilemma, and it's the old pokies again. We're asking that when you look at your finances, you look at ethics of those finances. And I think what's brought it to us is the Dunedin Mayor and their council. And that's how we're feeling. I think the things that you're doing are great for our community. I love it. I love the buildings. I love the thoughts that you've got. I love the bridge that's going to be built. I love the statues. I love the pose. I love the, you know, the whole thing that you're doing and you're thinking. And I know it's not easy for you, and you do get knocked. We're not knocking you, we're asking for something. We're asking that you now think about the most vulnerable part of our society. And please don't tell me that they can stop gambling, they can look after themselves, that it's a few against many and it's many that wins. Don't tell me it's good business for the community. I've heard it all. I got 2 years to 80, I've heard it all. You're our leaders. That's what I'm saying to you, for God's sake. And leaders look after the least. Because if you don't look after the least, you'll have a parted community forever, and it will get wider and wider and wider. And your policies make that width if you're not careful. Now you can look at me and say, stupid old fool, get off the living floor. You're too old anyway. Look, I was there when we fought for the Health Sponsorship Council. I was there when we stopped alcohol advertising. I was in that fight. I was younger and probably more passionate, but we did it. Who's to say there is not another way to fund our community? Why the hell are we taking from the least to give the most? Every time you build a great building, every time you do something else, and don't forget your stakeholders, but your stakeholders not only of the infrastructure of this community, for God's sake, your stakeholders of every damn family in this blooming community, every one of them. And if you don't start looking at your policies that pull them up, then we're going to have a very, very parted community. And I'm the first to say that Gisborne and the district are doing really well under your leadership. Thank you. But there's another story out there. There's a story of the grandparents that are losing homes. There's a story of the grandparents that are going put into homes so that people can gamble their money. There's a story of kids going to school without food. And believe me, you can tell me, that's ridiculous because some kids go and get the food and they've already had breakfast. Well, I can tell you and take you where the houses are where the kids don't have breakfast or lunch, because you know what? Because the parents came back and they gambled it all. And not only gambled it all, well, they're gambling and drinking it all as well. And don't tell me it's not happening, because I know it's happening. And I'm there for the businesses that are quietly trying to get a bit more money because it's been embezzled. And I'm there for those that can't talk because it's such a hidden thing. We can say in this year there have been 150 to 200 people that have asked for help. That's only the people that have asked for help in our community. So how many more are not asking for help? I can tell you there's a hell of a lot more not asking for help. It's a hidden thing. And how can charities say giving out charitable money when the money, especially from this community, is in hidden little dark places? It's money that is not spent on groceries and health and education. And it's money that's being pushed into those damn machines. And we're only talking about machines because they're the ones that draw the hope in. So the hopeless are funding everything that charities and trusts ask for. The Lion Trust refused our bowling club the other day because they didn't have a pokie machine in the district. Oh, boo-hoo, hooray! Isn't that wonderful? But how dare they, when a trust can fund right across New Zealand, how dare they try and emotionally blackmail our members and say, oh, for God's sake, no, shut your mouth because we can't get money to seed our lawns. Oh, dear, dear, dear. I'll get the money, I'll get the seeds, and I'll do the lawn. But that's one thing that we've done. But what we're asking for is to ethically look at your finances when you're talking about finances. And I would love you to join the Council of Dunedin. I would love the mayors to get together and say, okay, let's stop this nonsense. Let's look after the least. Let's look after the vulnerable. Let's find some other way to fund what is needed. And I have to say, in my long life in the community, I have seen the government of the day, and I don't care who it is, the government of the day load so much onto our non-government organisations and charities that we have become used to and addicted to sitting down, writing on a paper how much we want and putting it out. By God, it's got easy, hasn't it? Except that some charities have to pay people $4,000 to do that. But, so the money's going round, isn't it? It's wonderful. So the vulnerable are putting it into the machines, we're taking it out, and we're giving it back to them because they're putting it into the machines. That's not ethical, that's not moral. Thank you very much.
Yeah, kia ora whānau. So just in bringing that all in, what we're asking is that when we're looking at an ethics policy, that you take into account all that we've said. Because, yeah, we do everything that Nona said about being a part of this 10-year vision and more years. You know, we're all going forward as a community, and that's what that vision is all about. And we believe in it. But having this kind of stuff happen, it's saying to us that this part of the community is going forward. We're leaving this part behind us. So we need to take that into account and move all as one, as a community, and look at how we can make those changes so that we can all move forward. So that's why we really think that, you know, we have to make a bold decision, because we know how entrenched pokie money is in our communities. You know, and we're also looking at, you know, the confidentiality to be lodged and all that kind of stuff that keeps this going. So that's what Ka Pai Kaiti and all the community that we represent are asking, that policy be put in place, around ethical policy be put in place, and other things that there is a public opportunity for the public to have input into this policy. That's us.
Any questions from councillors? Councillor Akawata Brown.
Thank you, as always, for that passionate discussion, Nona, and thank you, Tuta, for being here today, Kaylee. Thank you for the work you do in our community. Do you see the money, I mean, again, we're always talking about where we apply for money to fund things. So do you see the role of that perhaps being a lot more injected into our community through, say, ECT? As one space, well, where would we get the money to support?
Yeah. So at the moment, what I'm seeing is there's a lot of double standards out there in our community, and I'm talking ECT too, you know, because they're promoting pokies too. So again, they're saying that we're trying to build this community, but in the background, they're promoting these funding workshops, and they're inviting people like New Zealand Community Trust there. So what I think needs to happen is that we need to make a stand, you know, and not just keep doing what we're doing now, but by making a stand and saying, look, we draw the line in the sand like we have on who we talk to and who we engage with when we're looking for resources that we truly need. So all of this hundreds of thousands of dollars that go out to our community through pokies, there needs to be another more ethical tap that needs to be turned on at governmental level. So if councils were to voice that to government, I think we're going to get there. But at the moment, this is all part of what we have to do. We have to build that support, and by going local body and getting all of the councils to talk that same language, then it would push the government. We're looking at about 100 mil that the government has to put forward to close down to help. So if we take away the pokey money, we've got to put something else in their place. And you're looking at about 100 mil right across. So that's what the government has got to come up. And we're saying that's easy. Although if you were to close down pokies overnight, the problem would be hard overnight. So all that money that gets poured into the Ministry of Health, the Justice Department, all that kind of stuff there, that would then be freed up, and you'd find that resources there. So it's not about taking money from roading or taking, we've got no money. The money's there, but they've just got to make that stand.
Councillor Whare.
Thank you, Tēnā kōrua. I'm hearing you in regards to the ethics kaupapa and how we can lead as a council in regards to policy. What I want to get from you is actually how that changes the community. So my question is, I wanted to ask, since the closing of the pokies in the Kaiti Mall, what has been the change of the community in that area? Like you're there every day, you guys are both there every day. Kapai Kaiti is located there. I wanted to know what the change in the mall is in regards to.
I'll just quickly, I went on my bike ride yesterday and this van pulled me over, and I could see them up the front. They pulled over and they jumped out, and I said, oh, what's happening here? And there were 6 adults in this van, and 3 of them came up to me when I got to them, and they said, look, we used to be in the TAB more than 3 times a week. Now that you've closed it down, we don't go there anymore. You know, and we were angry at the beginning, but now we've just realised that now we've got more, you know, where before we had nothing really. So it's made a change in their lives. You know, and I know there's probably about 1,000 more people out there that want to lynch me, you know, for that same reason, but it is making a difference. But the thing is, somebody has to make that first step, you know, and we're saying you have to be bold. Because when we took this kaupapa on, we knew that the ones that we were going to get the most threats from were our own. But we understood that, you know, so we're going in this not with one eye closed, we're going into this whole thing with a clear picture on what we're trying to achieve for our community.
And there's no hungry children walking around the laundry being pulled into our hub because to give them something to eat. The place is cleaner because nobody comes out half drunk. I mean, you know, pokies is daytime drinking as well, you know, and so all that sort of stuff. It's so much cleaner, it's so much happier. And the older ones have come back sitting around talking. It's just a very different atmosphere. The whole thing has changed. It's just so amazing that one pokie parlour, with all its other stuff going on, can change. There's no fights out there. There might be some fights further along, but there's no fights at that end, you know? And people are not scared to come in and sit down and start talking. You know, it's just very, very different. We've seen it. And as Tura said, people are angry at us. Of course they are. But the more and more that they see what's happening, and our whānau days are definitely bringing families together more. So when we have things around there, there's not people trying to get rid of, you know, frightened to go in that way. It's amazing how much fear and how much negativism, I think that's the word, it all brings. And a lot of that's gone, Joe. It's just gone.
Thanks for that. Last question. Oh, all good. Councillor Finn, last question. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Trita. Thank you, Nona. Just a question around gambling, the addiction itself. Because I understand it's an addiction, it's like a disease, like alcoholism and stuff. Is there, like going cold turkey, not gambling, what's the fallout of that? I hear the good stories around what's happening with families and stuff, but is there support that you need to give them once they've stopped gambling?
We had a gambling support trust here, but that's since been closed down. Within 4 months ago, it's been closed down. They pulled the funding, so now at the moment, anybody in Tairawhiti needs support with gambling. There's nothing out there.
Yeah.
So we're having to take that, you know, and do that ourselves. And it is we do get calls weekly, you know, the phone we do need support. So we're having to step up and offer a service because our only service in Tairawhiti has been closed down.
Yeah.
And it's an addiction like any other addiction.
Yeah, like alcoholism. Yes, sure.
The same ramifications, the same pressures on the kids and the whole structure of the front.
Yeah. So just as an estimate though, I know you said 150 to 200 people that you know of that seek help. Best guess, what would we be looking at in our community as having gambling issues or addictions?
Well, if you take that and then look at the underbelly of it, and when we're talking about pokies, we also look at the children and the families that have the phones, okay? And because of that addiction within a whole whānau or family, the children then get on their phones, and the one of the worst things that's happening is that gambling within children now, because they start with that fruit game, and then as it gets longer, suddenly pops up the money one. And you'll find children and families have a problem with that. Now that comes from, Uncle Pat Nata always said to me, Nona, it's not the terrible things that happen that you go, oh, it's the daily things that happen that get into the mind of children and become the norm. And so when you have a town with so many gambling venues and people and children just get used to Papa going in there or Mum or Auntie or Nan going in there, and that's just a normal daily thing, and I'll pick up my phone and play these. And what we're getting in our community is that normalcy, the normalcy of that gambling, and it's pokies that draw. You know, you can do lotto, you can go to races and things, but it's the pokies that draw and that bring the hope. You know, casinos are a different sort of thing, you know, it's all nice clothes and everything. But you go into some of ours, love, and you won't find that, but you'll find the absolute normal things because we go in there, you know, that's the time of day, that's what we do, and the children know that, and so it grows. And that's my hell, is that we're becoming a normalised addictive society.
Just quickly, just go into any pokie venue and you'll see there won't be a space seat.
Thank you. Councillors, may I welcome Mr. Chris Shaw. There's a handout with this that was handed out, and there will be a little presentation. Yep, just whatever suits you.
Hello. Ko Chris Shaw tēnei. I live here in Gisborne. My dad was born here. My nan and granddad were born here, and my nana came here slung under a basket from a sailing ship at the age of 16 on Waikanae Beach. Our children live here, and I hope that when they come back from their overseas trip, they choose to come back to live here in Gisborne. Not just because the oldies are here, but because it's a fantastic place, a vibrant and prosperous place that we can all be proud of. I'm going to read, I'm pretty nervous, excuse me. Look, first of all, let me be clear, this is not an anti-logging trucks plan. And it's not an anti-port plan either. So what's the plan? Remove our harbour log yard and upgrade our existing Matawhiro log yard to an inland port. Upgrade the existing Tairawhiti Road through to Waimata Valley Road to provide a high quality, purpose-built route from Tolaga Bay to the existing Matawhiro log yard. Eastland Inland Port, business as usual, take care of logistics, to forward logs, in fact, any cargo, including containers to Napier Port, shipment to market. Kiwi fruit, apples, we know that's a growth industry here. This removes all log trucks from our city and provides the much lacking available space for our log yard to expand to meet demand as necessary. That is, it future-proofs log exports from our city, from our region, I beg your pardon. No change for the truck drivers. Logs still come out of the forest, still go to the Matawhiro log yard as they do now, but here's the difference. Instead of the logs being trucked back through our town to the seaport, they're all loaded onto rail cars for transport to Napier Port for export. Transport costs to Napier will be significantly more than the few kilometres back to our port. However, the international trend towards larger ships will reduce the overall cost to market. Napier Port's looking towards a $350 million upgrade to future-proof its ability to accept these ships. And you can bet they'll be actively looking for increased freight volumes to recoup their return on investment. Tauranga Port did this recently. They saw the writing on the wall, they need to take the big ships. The way the industry is going. So, more cost to Napier, but less cost to market. Maybe this is cost neutral, or maybe it's overall cost positive. That, however, is for any feasibility study to determine. Under this proposal, our port would not cease operations, but instead transfer them to their inland port at Matawhiro. Same people, same skills, same jobs. Same truck drivers delivering big heavy things, same skilled staff sorting and forward them on. And more importantly, still clipping the ticket. So the logs still get to market and our inland port still makes money. No catastrophic job losses and no collapse of the forestry industry. However, I do have a suspicion that the inland port won't make as much money for us as our current port does. And this, I expect, is where any real argument against this plan will arise. It's the money. So what's the counter? With our Berlin Wall of wood removed from our harbour and the log trucks removed from our roads, we free up our city's finest real estate for profitable redevelopment by a new Port Eastland Property Development Division. Tourism is a targeted growth area. Well, target an international hotel chain to build a fantastic new hotel in our harbour basin. We need one. What better place for one? Develop the upper log yard for medium density mixed use housing and commercial. Build a viaduct basin just like Auckland's. Auckland doesn't have beautiful Kaiti Beach at one end and Waitanai Beach at the other like we do though. Build a cultural centre that would welcome not just the increasing cruise ship visitors, but all visitors to our region and share the stories of our history, and finally pay long-awaited respect to the first meeting place of our peoples. Give our boaties a decent ramp and make it truly accessible. Maintain and enhance our profitable commercial fishing industry, a real working port. Think Tairawhiti in Napier and its restaurants and bars overlooking the fishing boats. It's a fantastic place. This way, we fully realise the potential of our beautiful district with its overwhelming bounty of natural features and resources, and would also make a buck out. I expect this would more than make up for any lost revenue from the relocation of our port log yard. I'd expect it would also create additional jobs and income for our district over and above what is produced by the use of that land now. Are we getting best value out of that land as it is right now? Lastly, when I discuss this proposal with my friends and colleagues, I get the same comment. Yep, we like the money, but we don't like the trucks. I'm sure the log truck drivers themselves take absolutely no pleasure in driving through the middle of our city. They too have children and grandchildren at the very schools they drive past every day. Port Eastland intend to increase log tonnage through our town from 3 million to 5 million tonnes a year. That's 5 million tonnes a year, all trucked through our city. Understand this, every single log that is loaded onto a ship at our port has to pass right through our town. That's a full truck in and an empty truck out, in and out. They got no other choice. But Port Eastland do. They've got a choice because it is they who control all log movements through our city. It is they that have the monopoly on the log export to market. They got it all, no other option. But I'm here to kind of let you guys know that there is another option. I've outlined the big picture, but I'm no economist. So I call upon our council to consider if they will add their support to a feasibility study into this plan to not only free our town from the burden of the Berlin Wall of wood, but to socially, environmentally and economically transform our city for better. What greater benefit for the people of Tairawhiti than to return to us our inner harbour as a taonga, as a treasure to be cherished for the benefit of generations to come. Leave it better than you found it. That's pretty much all that's required of us citizens, councillors and business leaders. Leave it better than you found it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Foster and then Councillor Burdine.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Hey, have you shared your vision with any organisations? And if you have, what has been the response you've got so far?
Yes, I have. Interest. Look, I've spoken to a lot of people. I emailed you guys Monday night, I think. And I didn't realise this meeting was on. I had no intention. But look, at Future Tairawhiti, that's exactly what I think this is all about, is securing the future for the future generations. Yes, I have. I had a meeting, Terry Sheldrake, Chamber of Commerce. He asked Bob Proudfoot to come in. I know Bob's got a plan to rail it through the city, but quite simply, you can spend whatever money you want on bridges, rails, underpasses, whatever. The problem is the location. Everything still has to go right through our city. It's just, so all we do is we just go 6k down the road, same job. So, but look, yeah, so anyway, my plan is ultimately to go to Eastern Community Trust, because I understand they're shareholders, and I guess as shareholders they have control over the direction. So I wanted to go to that with support. I've got support from a lot of people, business people, accountants. Anyway, but at this stage I'm absolutely unprepared because this kind of jumped in real quick. So yeah, that's it.
Well done. Futuristic paper. You wouldn't have the opportunity to have anyone give you a hypothetical figure what all this would cost?
Certainly a lot less than the $80 million they're intending to spend on the log, you know, the twin berth. I mean, I look at that and look, as I understand it, I really don't know, but I've heard some figures that I think rough profit on the port's around about $5 million a year. I don't know if that's true or not, but I look at 80 million bucks. That's 40 years worth of $5 million bucks a year. The thing is that the port requires ongoing maintenance, and the port also has a limit on ship size. The trend we know all over the world is for larger ships, just more environmentally friendly and far more efficient. I mean, hence my port here. Okay, more cost to Napier, but less to market, sort of thing. So the overall trip should be either cost neutral or cost positive. But an inland port would be cheaper to run. The rail would be supplied by the government. Matawhiro Yard, right on the rail line right now. It's got space to expand. The port doesn't. I think it would be a smart strategic move. Okay, there's a cost associated with that. So we can look at this two ways. We can look at it from a social economics point of view, and we can look at it from a laissez-faire full market capitalist point of view. And if we take into account the social costs of the damage it's doing right now, eroding and just I guess our quality of life. But look, I think what we might lose on that, we'd probably make up in the redevelopment of that land. I mean, it's outstanding north-facing, slightly elevated land that's right in the city. The gentrification of the inner city areas that would probably flow on from that sort of thing, I think would add huge value. That's what would attract people to live in Gisborne, to choose to live here, is our natural resources that, quite frankly, at the moment we're squandering. Our history is second to none. It's world class. We're squandering that. I think there's a better way.
Thank you.
Councillor Seymour. Thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation and thanks for sending it to us the other night. Would you presume then that kiwi fruit and squash would also need to go to Napier if you're not going to have the port there?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Steve Amore is our structural engineer in our office. He's also a kiwi fruit farmer. Zespri came down to him this year or last year, I'm not sure. He said, lads, in your future projections, you're going to have to factor in the cost of trucking to Tairawhiti now, because the small ships that come into the port now are not going to be coming in the future. Now, that's come from Zespri, and they're pretty smart strategic planners. They look quite a way ahead. So I don't know this. I don't know whether the port had got any information on this or what, but yes, I do see our growing apples and kiwi fruit industry being then containerised and shipped to by rail to.
Thank you. So the second part of my question, Councillor Stoltz, if you don't mind, was the issue of the rail, because rail from Napier to Wairoa was to be operationalised by this Christmas, and it's just constantly being put back. So there's a substantial issue, and you said earlier in your presentation around that the government would pay for the rail. So have you thought about that?
Oh, I've thought a lot about it actually, and in fact, I've just been reading about how they constructed it in the old days. You've got to realise that before World War I and II, there was absolutely no rail at all. They built it with pickaxes and shovels and horse and cart and dynamite and stuff. Now, if they can build that then surely we can maintain it now with our far superior technology. That, Pat, respectfully, that argument, that the rail argument that it's too difficult, just does not wash.
But it's been tried. Oh, we're not meant to debate it, but it was meant to be open from Wairoa to Napier by Christmas, wasn't it?
Look, yeah, and you know what? Our port gets closed regularly too by weather and things like that. And our port requires an awful lot of maintenance to keep it up. It's got to be dredged and things like that. So look, yes, if you've got an asset, a transport asset, then you've got to spend the dough to look after it. That's just
absolutely
that's the deal,
Thank you. I'm going to ask one question and then Councillor Tairawhiti around it. Chris, I'm not sure if you're aware that recently the central government awarded a 450k grant to look into the rail feasibility there was no mention of any inland port, but are you aware that recently there were money awarded for a 450k for a feasibility of rail in our region?
I am aware of it, and that's why I really love this idea, because I think if I think the rail would probably be, well, maybe not profitable if it was only just for apples and kiwi fruit, because they only come in at one time a year, I guess. I mean, maybe the apples will be staggered, I'm not sure, but logging is massive, and that would absolutely secure rail's future. There's absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. And yeah, look, I know Napier Port supported the Wairoa to Napier Railway, well, simply because they're going to get logs on it, they're going to get business. It's kind of good for them. I hope our port company looks strategically at this and doesn't just sort of kind of let somebody else come down and go, well, hang on, why don't we make it really easy for our logs to come to Napier? Sure, going to cost a bit more to get there, but hey, we're going to get it from there to China or Japan or wherever on earth these logs go for cheaper. We're going to make it worth your while. So it's an opportunity we've got. I don't think it should be squandered or taken by somebody else.
Thank you. Last question, Councillor Ako.
Thank you, thank you so much. You've made my day. I really appreciate the amount of thought and consideration you've taken as well in the social and environmental aspects of your report to us. And so thank you so much, Chris. My question to you today is simply, what do you see other than the economics you mentioned earlier, money? What are the other barriers that stop, this type of strategic thinking in our region? Can you kind of highlight maybe some other things that would stop this, what are hindering this? Because we have had a number of people bring to our attention this issue, and I'm just interested from your perspective, what are some of the other barriers that stop this process?
I think the thing is a simple fact that the port's a cash cow. So somehow that has to be offset. But look, what Nona said so passionately, I totally agree, and I'm probably going to cock this up how I say it, but when you look at funding models, when you look at where your money comes from, there's a decision to be made. Now, the medical community have a wonderful little wee 4 words that totally sums up the Hippocratic Oath. Those words, first do no harm. Now, I suggest that when you make your decisions, and same with, the pokies, because at the end of the day, their sole justification is look at all the soccer nets we sort of supply or uniforms and stuff like that. This is the wonderful things we do with some of our profits. If you ask, first of all, you looked at a proposal and said, well, look, first do no harm. Yeah, the money's good and it makes good money, but it does harm. It does a lot of harm to our city, our district, our roads, our quality of life. It would be probably enough for some people who are looking at sort of bringing their families down here to live to go, oh, actually, no, rather not. Look, we're an isolated region. People don't come here to move up the corporate ladder. We're not doing corporate jobs and stuff like that. We come here either because we got family, or we come here because we want a quality of life, and we want to build a quality of life for our family. And there's got to be a cost put on that. And but anyway, I don't think that what we lose out of an inland port will be more than what we gain from the benefits of actually full redevelopment of our inner city centre and actually providing at least a full heart to our city. We can be the best cool little city in Gisborne, if not the world, quite frankly.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks.
Thanks for that.
Cheers.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillors, I welcome Mr. David Stokes, our last presenter for the day. David, please come and join me in the front.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for hearing me. My concern, I'm a retired farmer and I've fought weeds and used chemicals all my life. I never really liked doing either. And so I'm here today to back up a couple of your councillors who I know are concerned about the weed on Kaiti Hill, the purple Seneco. I think it behoves us, well, I'm now a city person, to do something about it. In the country, we've always been fighting the proliferation of weeds that will affect us economically and are simply a curse on the land. This is right in the middle of town. I don't know where it's come from, but I know where it is. There's a huge patch of it. It's starting to spread. It hasn't spread as much as it might have, more through good luck than good management. The fact is that it flowers, it's flowering now at a stage when Gisborne expects westerly winds, and I believe that most of the airborne seeds are possibly going out to sea. Obviously, the wind doesn't stay in one direction all the time, and we have had southerly spells, and I think that will explain why it's spread up Gadams Hill Road. I would love all of you councillors to make the time to drive up Gadams Hill Road and see what is the result of doing nothing, because nothing is being done up there. The only thing that's being done so far is my wife, who walks up the hill for exercise, and she's taken out all the plants on the side of the road, but when you get to the top of the hill, it's all, I suppose, lifestyle properties, and they've got 2 or 3 acres. Those 2 or 3 acres are largely covered in it. There's a road that leads down to the left to where Donald Gordon lives. I don't remember the name of the road, but there you will see a block of pine trees, and you will see how beautifully it's spreading under the pine trees. In fact, it spreads anywhere where it's not grazed. I think the cattle may control it because anywhere where I see a grazed field, it's not proliferating. But in my youth, I used to go deer stalking up the back country, and I would see yellow ragwort everywhere. I think this will be way worse. It looks worse. Purple doesn't blend with the landscape. I think there are other vectors. Anecdotally, I've heard that the forestry contractors, I think Kaiti Hill was harvested, as Graham Thompson told me, before his property. And when he harvested pine trees, there was this proliferation of purple Seneco came up where he didn't know where it wasn't there previously. It was there after the block had been harvested. So that's one thing. I don't know, other than that, it could be on other normal vehicles. On my way out, I still have a farm at Muriwai, and I was out on my way out there. I pulled a plant out on Awapuni Road, where Murray's McPhail's got all those vegetables growing, just right on the side of the road. At Muriwai Railway Station, where I've been working with the train club, there was a large plant in the J2 Cool Store complex. And I had to get onto Jushin's to go in there to get it out, but I was too late because half of the plant is already seeded. So it's going to spread, and it's the old story of 1 year seeding, 7 years weeding. Thinking of, I don't like saying the council should do this or should do that. You just listening to this morning's presentations, you've got just amazing things to have to deal with, and I admire you all for how you're coping with that. But I think a little bit of leadership and encouragement to people in the community to own this problem. In the early stages, it's actually not that hard to control. It comes out of the ground quite easily. Unfortunately, you've got to wait till the flowering stage to actually see it and know where it is. But I think, thinking of ideas that I think more publicity about it, more leadership from the council, perhaps a mail drop to residents, and an encouragement for people up every side road to be responsible for that first plant that might arrive in their district and get it under, take it out. It's a matter of having some, if there's more than a few, some gloves, pull it out of the ground and cut the heads off. They cut off very easy with a pair of scissors and into a rubbish bag. I've decided we go for walks up Tairawhiti Hill a lot just to sort of keep fit. And lately I've stopped doing that in favour of pulling them out myself. And I've started from where the port offices are, and I've come across that hill, and I'll clear that whole face, my wife and I, without much trouble. And so I think it's more a matter of mobilising the community. You can't do everything from in here, and our rates only go so far. But I don't think this is a very costly deal right now to get the message out there and encourage people to take responsibility for it and move in from the outside. I think if we can, where it just spreads a wee bit, if there's a lot there, people think, oh, there's so much, we can't do much about it. But if you just move in from the outside, and I'm hoping that by the end of maybe next week, I'll have cleared to where the Freezing Works monument is, just keep that clear. There hasn't been a lot of plants there, mostly because the wind direction, I think. And also when we've been going up Tairawhiti Hill, we've pulled out everything on the right-hand side, and that's containing it. And that's what I think we need to do. So thank you for listening to me.
Thanks a lot, David. Any questions, councillors? Oh, good.
Okay, thanks, cheers.
We will break for 15 minutes, have coffee, and be back 10:15. Thank you. I said 10:15. Oh, well, 10:15 it is. Move in second. Thank you. Did I say 10:20? 10:15, yeah. Just following up from the public deputations, we will ask staff to look into issues that were raised about the yacht club, about the ethics policy, because we have had that discussion before, never really developed that. We have had some discussions about that before, and yeah, so thanks for that.
And the log exercise?
Through the chair, I'm not anticipating following up on anything in terms of that log exercise. It's feasibility funding that's currently there. It's not for us to action.
You will have to, well, that's, yeah.
Supplementary then, will that be written back to the gentleman so that he can make his contacts with AT or the Chamber of Commerce or whoever he likes? Because if people come here...
So already an email contact, he has indicated that he's going to talk to ECT next.
Right.
So councillors, if I can get everyone to go to page 14, this is the decision report on the Waipawa flood control scheme.
Through the chair, I'll get Dave and Neil to speak to the paper, but I just wanted to note that we have on paragraph 32, it was that you submitted an application. That application hasn't been submitted yet. That will be going forward next week. There are 5 councils that are collaborating. You may have seen in the paper, Minister Jones is quite positive towards using PGF funding towards infrastructure. It's been a result of
anyone hasn't seen it.
Thank you. If we can ask Dave and Neil, the floor is yours.
So just by way of an update, this report brings back the findings post resource consent application that we put through for the Waipawa flood control scheme. It's also the final costings that we have worked through with the revised modelling that you're aware from the previous model and costings that we had. This is the updated stop banks, including all the right levels, taking into account climate change and making sure that we had the heights right the way through the scheme as well. It also includes costings for work that was there subject of that were developed through the resource consent phase with parties along the stop bank as well. So this is our estimates, knowing everything that we now know of how we think that the project can be rolled out. We have the project out for tender at the moment, so we're waiting for the tenders to come back for phase 1, so year 1 of the design for the build. So we're at that stage now and have that, and are looking to try and appoint a contractor so that we can start this construction season where possible.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it was disappointing that the cycle trail wasn't included, but because there'd be real inefficiencies of doing it as a separate operation. The 3 million quoted, is that for the full length of the scheme to put a trail on, or is that just a sector of it?
Through the chair, yeah, that's the 3 million is an estimate for the whole 64 k's being lime-sanded or a similar material.
Yeah. So is there any way of addressing the fact that it will be really inefficient to come in later and do it?
Yeah, subject to external funding or internal funding for specifically for the cycle trail, we'll come back to the resource consent plan and go through that resource consent application again, either in sections or for the whole lot again, with more detail as commented on by the Commissioner.
Any other discussions? Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, the agreeing to leave the funding in the 10-year plan, I'm just wondering whether we probably move that to the first 3 years of the plan, and by then we would know, we would have a better idea if there's any assistance funding coming through, because we might need to look at it at that point and say, well, because obviously we're putting a lot of the work further out otherwise, aren't we? Because if we don't get that any grant funding, because we've obviously got a whole lot more money that we need to spend than what's been budgeted for, that which means we're going to have a whole lot less work done if we don't get the grant funding. So I'm suggesting that we go to 2A, leave the existing Y as is in the 218, 221 part of that's the first 3-year program of this LTP, and reassess at that point, because it may mean that we have to evaluate the risk at that point, say, well, we're going to, how much longer is the whole project going to take if we don't have that funding? Let's hope we do get that funding, but to put it right out to 28 before we make that decision, the risk factor becomes greater and greater all the time. So I'm just wondering if that's worth considering.
But B covers.
B covers it.
Sorry?
B says exactly what you were saying.
Take a look at B.
Oh.
It says in 2021 we're looking at that. After this.
Oh, yeah, okay, right, sorry. Yeah, that's right.
Councillor Seymour, thank you. I'm assuming that our bid is specifically the 6 million. I can turn it on, thank you. How much of that, because the sum of money for 18 to 28 is 16.4 on the same page, page 19, sorry. So, I mean, how much of that work is going, would that cover if we do get to 6 million? How much of what's planned over the next 2 to 3 years is going to be completed if we're successful in getting 6 million? Like, we understand, and Mr. Wilson's referred to it, the tender's out for the first portion. Now we're looking at the next portion.
So that additional 6 million from the PGF, should we get it, will allow us to construct more. So we're...
But not more, how much? Because that's what the government are going to want to know, won't they?
I'm not quite sure of the question. So we're putting in a $12 million project to the PGF with a 50-50 split. So our component is 6 million. PGF, central government, will be 6 million. That'll allow us to construct more in the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. So they will then understand, because it's no different really to not getting the consent for the cycleway. They're going to want the really well prepared case to totally understand what it is we're asking for 6 million. So we're saying we're asking for 6 million because that's we don't have that in front of us. Bear with me. We're asking for 6 million of a 12 million project, and the 12 million project is this. So they're getting the whole package.
So the PGF project is from the Waipara River mouth up to the Matapara Bridge and back down on the other side. So it's a nice, succinct project. It includes a cycle trail on that, because then it was a nice, succinct cycle trail project. So that allows us to upgrade that section and put a cycle trail on top. We'll have to come back with a resource consent for that.
If you make a new consent.
We'll have to come back.
And supplementary then, does that, within that scope of work, which you've just described, is there any property purchase necessary? I know you still say in this paper there are 3 outstanding properties. Are they in that piece of?
No, I think we own all of that now. We've bought a couple of little bit sections on the Tairawhiti stream.
That's not going to be an inhibiting factor.
No.
Right, thank you.
So I just added, sorry, through Madam Chair, just in terms of that funding, but it's probably important. It's important to recognise that it came from the regional sector collaborating with the 4 other councils, of which I think 3 of them are the surge regions. So through Basil Chamberlain, he's been negotiating a lot of this with government officials, and it is about recognising the Crown's contribution and risk that they have in terms of the flood control schemes protecting their own assets as well. So that further puts weight behind our individual proposals. So it's a package of works that for long-term sustainability around flood control schemes that the council has the Crown has a stake in getting these done too.
There's been some talk recently about the need for a 4-metre wide top, and I just really wonder whether we've given that consideration, whether we can come down a little bit on that. my understanding is we can actually work that from an engineering point of view to hold back a river. Like, you know, we've still got a very wide base at the height we're going, and if we can just go to a slightly narrower top. The other thing was, as a thought of a large project like this, which will go on for years, could it be possible that we could actually undertake it ourselves to a certain extent, either through our commercial arm, Gisborne Holdings or something like that, and buy a couple of big motor scrapers or the machinery we need and undertake it ourselves? Have we checked that as a possibility for cost effectiveness?
Through the chair, so 4 metre top width is an industry standard across the country. So it takes into account all the risks, ground conditions. I'll talk louder then. So 4 metre top width is a standard width across the country for stock banks. It's about balancing the risk and the width. It's also constructability. So a 4 metre top width is easier to actually construct with the size of machinery you're doing the work. So we wouldn't recommend going smaller, narrower than 4 metre on the top width. In regards to council or a council entity doing the actual construction work, that's not something that we've directly looked at. There'd be a lot of work in regards to a CCO or another entity doing that. So we haven't considered it.
The reason that we have, sorry, through the chair, the reason that we haven't considered ourselves is because of the very short construction window that we are doing this project within. So we would have the gear standing still for 9 months of the year, or we would actually have to go out and start competing on a lot of our own contracts that we have now. So the risk of having the gear tied up for 3 months of the year and then having nothing for 9 is something that we wouldn't be keen to get into. It's also something that we don't have expertise in the construction or the operators, and operators are very hard to come by in this region as well. So it's not something that we as the staff would be looking to investigate at this stage.
The window you speak of, is that a weather-based window or is that a budgetary window?
Through the chair, it's weather-based, so we're looking to do this in the summer months so that we know that it's the low flow period. It's because we're working on the inside of the stop bank.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, this application to the Provincial Growth Fund, the criteria for getting the funding, is it just the fact that it is flood protection works? The reason why I'm asking is because I would think that there would be few other areas that have such an important financial consideration to the flooding of a particular area compared to our Poverty Bay Flats. And all I'm raising this for is I'm just trying to strengthen our case to get the money. So if there's any aspect or angle that you can come at to increase our success rate, I'm pushing you into it.
The Herald article is specifically for flood prevention infrastructure. He says that he recognises that there are a number of local authorities that need it. But he also doesn't say he's got the money, does he? This comment is that Regional Economic Development Minister says he's exploring the option of earmarking some millions, in inverted commas. And it notes Basil Chamberlain's role in this, in that article.
That's why I could be, I've read it.
Oh, you have?
Oh, sorry, so the only competition there would be from other PGF type bids, like in tourism space. The regional councils are all joined up on this, and so we're not competing against one another. So you've got the likes of Edgecombe as one of the ones in there as well, I understand, where they've got, you know, significant people that could be harmed from this. But the key driver is around, so it's not the flood control scheme, it's the economic impacts, the social impacts, the environmental impacts, of which the flood control scheme helps. So
So David, I have a question about, in the paper we mention that we might object or the cycleway refusal. What is the criteria for that? How do you decide, or how do we decide if we go that way or not?
So through you, Madam Chair, The consent for the cycleway being refused is something we've been talking with our regulatory staff about, and then also about, as a project team, about what the next steps could be for us in that space. Looking at the feedback from the commissioners, should a cycleway consent be put back in, there is information that we can add to help that consent go through. Our focus as a team is quite selfishly on building the stock control bank in the timeframes that we have. As committees aware, sorry, we don't have the money included in the budget for this cycleway in our funding that we have at the moment. We have the project that we're working through with ECT through Korpatutia and up to the Matawhiro Bridge at the moment, which would be put through in a separate consent. The team talking with regulatory the approach that we can re-put in when we have funding available and when we actually have some of the detail that's required to actually build that cycleway, so when we're closer to the time. The other thing to remember is when we build the stock control bank, we're not starting at the bottom and ending at the top. We're building this in patches. So we start in Ormond, for example, where we know we have some of our critical risk areas. So there's not a continuous trail being built as we go. So the ECT funding for the Korpatutia cycleway is something that would be a completely separate consent with different parties. Something for the 64 kilometres has a range of parties would have to do some more detail for that consent to go through. Whilst we might disagree with the findings of the Commissioner, taking ourselves to court isn't something I'd be wanting to recommend to this council. So we're going to work through that. We've talked with the funders around the implications and they're comfortable with a project by project approach as well.
Thank you. Any other discussions or? Moved by Councillor Seymour. So we're on page 15. We note the contents of this report, recommends, agrees to leave the existing Waipower flood control budget as is in the 2018-28 long-term plan. B, reevaluates and refines the flood control budget requirements as part of the 21-31 long-term plan. Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks, Neil. So, councillors, we move to page 23. Local Government Funding Agency, AGM. Self-explanatory. Moved by Councillor. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Finn. Any discussion? If not, all in favour? Contrary? Carried. Page 37. We move to the confirmation of the governance structure for the spatial plan project. We welcome Ms. Kohere, who will talk to us about this. The floor is yours, Keita. You can.
Recently you received, you endorsed an approach around spatial planning, and we're seeking to tidy up the project planning and the governance structure that we'd like to implement for the development of the spatial plan. We've got a targeted engagement process that we're planning out at the moment, and merely this report is seeking, I guess, expressions of interest because it will be time heavy. It's not seeking to remove decision making of council, but really trying to get an indication from councillors who might like to be involved. It will be time heavy during peak periods, but in really looking for that commitment and champions from councillors to support the governance structure, and I guess flagging the outcomes of this plan will underpin the development of our resource management plan the following year. So will be a key strategic document. There's a lot of community engagement and stakeholder engagement anticipated. So it's seeking to confirm that governance structure for the rollout of the plan and looking for champions. Happy to take any questions.
My only question is for my own understanding. We had the library report that got done, and it was looking at the way we roll out our projects, and it was saying that the way that we structure our projects wasn't working properly. Is having an advisory group consistent with the outcomes of the Maven report? Because I see in the Lawson Field Theatre report it's saying that to disband the steering group because it's not good process. I'm just checking that this is consistent with that. Thank you.
Through Madam Chair, so there are two structures. The steering group usually comprises technical expertise, the project management oversight inside of council, so an internal. The advisory group are the external, so that's the differentiation.
Okay, so we will discuss that later, the membership. So the paper on page 38 was moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Vedette. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you.
Are you wanting voices of interest to be involved with this, or how are you going to implement that?
We will email. We will email later if someone's interested. Keita will. So Ms. Koheri will send out an email, and then people that are interested, let her know, and then we will decide on it. Yep, bring your CV out. Roll your CV out. Yeah. Anyway, so we move on to page 47. It's the DrainWise project progress report, and there will be a presentation by Wolfgang. And this is just the noting report. How are you, Wolfie? Take a seat. Yep. We have a. I will give it to you.
In terms of presentation, we'll either move. Oh, yes.
So you just click.
Kia ora, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on the DrainWise program. Just as a start, I just want to remind everyone about the DrainWise wastewater discharge reduction plan. So that's the plan that really sets the direction for the team in terms of what we do. It looks at all the issues, the high impact, medium impact, and low impact issues that need to be addressed so that we achieve what we want to achieve through the DrainWise program. My presentation today will be primarily about the high impact component, because that has literally has the highest impact and the biggest bang for buck in terms of improving our current situation. You've probably seen this graph before, but I thought I'd put it back on the screen for you. The key issue with the high impact issues is that those relate almost entirely to inflow issues. So that's water that flows over the land into gully traps, either through cracks or over top of gully traps. And that really is, if you look at the right-hand screen, is this peak here. If you want to understand this graph, it's quite simple. The area underneath the lines represents the amount of water getting into the wastewater network. So if you look here, the inflow component is by far, in relative terms, the greatest amount of water gets into the system. Through the rain event, you then have infiltration, and you have another peak here, which is when the water that's been sitting on the land soaks through the water and gets into our pipes. But you can see the relative contribution of the infiltration versus the inflow is very small. So it's really about the inflows. Also, based on our work, the inflow component, that's the big chunk of water, 90% of that arises from private property infrastructure, which makes it a difficult issue to deal with. So we need to have a process around how we deal with private property. And to do that, you're probably aware, we have an investigation process. So we do property inspections, we do desktop work, we have network models, both stormwater and wastewater, which are relevant to DrainWise, and we do other GIS analyses. And all this work we use to inform where we do our work and what we do. As an example, this is some of the work we've done recently. That is a map of overland flow paths. So the blue lines are overland flow paths, and we can quite quickly see where they intersect with houses, and then we know those houses are higher risk areas where water can flow into, for example, gully traps. So we can focus on those areas. Another example is depression mapping. So we have got a much better level of depression mapping now, and we know which houses sit in depressions, and we can target the infrastructure in those areas where we know most likely we can have water flowing over gully traps or through cracks in the infrastructure. And our approach is now to, we're calling it a touch once approach, where we identify all issues that need to be resolved. And because drain-wise is related to both stormwater and wastewater, now we need to understand all the issues on private property that relate to stormwater and wastewater. So the spouting, the downpipes, which are stormwater, the overland flow paths on those properties, as well as the wastewater infrastructure like the gully traps and the wastewater laterals. Because if we are going to ask people to do works on their properties, we need to tell them what all the issues are so they can plan accordingly and get the work done. We will be providing all this information to homeowners with notices to fix or replace, and there are various issues related to that, and I'll come to that in a subsequent slide. And then same with education and awareness. I'll talk about that again in the subsequent slide. It's about 2 or 3 slides time. So just I've done some mapping for you. This is the new mapping. That is a map of the property inspections we have done since 2016. Prior to 2016, we inspected those areas to the southwest of Rootney Road. So we've done a lot of property inspections, and we've gathered this information, so now we're in a position to use information to effect change on private property. The green properties are those properties where there are no issues. The red is where there is at least one issue per property. So when you're looking at the private property infrastructure, almost every single property has some issue. Some have multiple, some might only have some spouting that's damaged. But it's just to show you the extent of the job at hand. Some of those will include housing entities. But now we're looking at all issues. Since 2017, we've done 592 gully trap repairs. So all the properties we've inspected, we've also inspected with a view to looking at the gully traps and seeing if we can do a minor fix in the meantime. And so the blue areas are where we have made fixes. And so we've done 592. There's another 1,400 odd which have problems that are too big for us to fix while we're on site. So gully traps, big issues. And those will be issues like cracked gully traps, absent gully traps that are too low to the ground, various things. So how are we getting the private work done? So we're focusing on the key areas and the critical issues because we want to effect change as fast as possible. We recognize that it's going to take time, but let's do it as fast as we can. And I mentioned I'll talk a bit more about the letters to homeowners and education. It's all good and well saying that we can just produce a list of what someone has to fix. But as we know, and it was quite clearly explained this morning, we aren't a very wealthy area, and we don't want to impart undue economic hardship onto private property owners. The other thing is that most of these issues are located in the poorer areas of Gisborne. So for us to provide a list of what you have to do and say do it next week just wouldn't work, and would impart undue economic hardship. So we need to be strategic in how we do this, and whilst we are creating a list of all the issues with notices to fix or replace, we need to contextualize that in terms of the ability of the community to pay. So when we follow that initial letter with compliance and enforcement, we need to be very sensitive and clever about how we do that. Because we want to enable the community to make their repairs. We don't want to be being the man of the stick. You know, we want to try and make it work. And the way we can do that is we can look at what needs to be done, what costs a lot of money, allowing more time to do the more expensive bits, allowing less time to do the critical bits. Yeah, for example, a downpipe, which might cost $200 to fix, maybe a couple of months. Those properties with multiple issues where you might replace both a wastewater lateral and a stormwater lateral a longer period of time. But those decisions haven't yet been made, and we will be, as a project team and as council staff, providing options to the council to consider moving forward on how we deal with that, because we do need to decide how we do that.
Excuse me, Wolf, on that, in that space, isn't this an example of historical property development, you know, in these areas that has created this? So for a number of the residents in these spaces, they would be feeling that it's a council created issue, so therefore council should pay. That's some of the rhetoric I've had from people. So we are wanting to do this for future proofing the region, because this has been a huge issue for a long time. And I hear that you're trying to empower a very, as you say, a poor area of our community. So the tension is that relationship is that if this had been done historically, obviously the money being put into it to make it work, we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. So how are we managing that tension where people simply see council has done this?
So it might be better if I answer that one. So through the chair, we've had a number of illegal connections that are there, and by their nature, they're illegal. So we're finding them, they're not ones that we have signed off on or done. There were also some issues with a lot of the Housing New Zealand houses when they were put in around overland flow paths being completely changed, or people will look at a drain up the back of their house, decide it's unsightly and fill it in, not realising that that's actually quite a critical piece of infrastructure to what's going on. During the last LTP, you developed or enabled us as staff to have budget to be able to look at some of the on-property fixes where it's not for one person to fix 6 people's properties flooding into their areas. So it really is working through the different options that we have there. And part of the reports that we'll be bringing back around enforcement and or compliance with how we're going to manage those illegal connections, where how far your appetite goes or how we enforce those going forward, balancing that against people's ability to pay. So a lot of these things are downpipes that have been removed or put back in by a different tenant or a different landlord because they don't like the water going onto the grounds. They put it into our gully trap. So it's around trying to fix some of those things and not have to go back again. But it is, as I said, this is illegal. Some of the stuff that's happening, it's not allowed for under the Building Act. So it is trying to fix that.
Thanks, Dave. Part of this is the education and awareness, also making people aware of what is council responsibility and their responsibility, also making people aware of what they can do to help the situation, providing them with the information that you know, they can also make financially sound decisions on what they do. And at the moment, we are reviewing our education and awareness on drain-wise, and we're going to be going forward hoping for some innovative and you know, more effective ways to reach those people that are affected. Through the LTP, it was also raised that council should be looking at alternative means to fund some of this work on private property, looking at mechanisms, strategies, payback schemes, and so we are looking at that, but that is still very much in its infancy. And again, it's to try and enable people to pay for things, but you know, through clever ways.
Yes. Just on that education and awareness, I think that's great. That's really critical. I had a couple of notices to fix on my properties and that, and I went into a cold sweat straight away. It was actually incredibly simple, you know, and I think if the people see a notice that they have to fix their gully trap, one of mine was a little bit low, and that was easy fix, and one was a cracked gully trap. I fixed one in 20 minutes and the other in 30 minutes. But if people see that and they haven't got those skills and awareness that it is actually a simple fix, then they may back off and not get onto it. But yeah, that education awareness, hey, this problem is solved by doing this, and it's actually a simple fix, then it will get done, rather than people thinking, oh, I don't know how to do that, I don't know what it means, I don't know how much it's going to cost, and just pulling back.
100% right. And that education awareness needs to be targeted at empowering those people to make those changes. And that is the focus of this change, this extra work. So we spoke, Dave quickly mentioned that we are, in the LTP, we have the public pipes and private property budget. That's the work that we are looking to do on private properties to assist with the issue. Now, what it really is, it's really just extending the public stormwater network. The key issue is getting the rainwater off properties. Now, a lot of properties are quite far away from public connections. They're all on flat land. They all have depressions. You know, Gisborne's pretty flat. And in a flat environment, it's quite hard to provide pipes everywhere. But if you don't have a pipe that goes to a second or third property towards the back lot, it becomes very hard for those people to drain their properties. So we are looking at extending our stormwater network, which is basically what the public pipes on private property is. And that allows people to connect into the public system easier because the pipe is closer to them. We can intercept surface flows by having sumps and grates above our pipes, and we can locate those services in the right place so we can drain depressions that would otherwise not drain. I've got an example here for you. So this is the first cab off the rank, and you know, we're looking at this catchment here. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the flooding on here, but in this catchment, there's quite a lot of rain on grid, so a lot of ponding, and the water doesn't get away. So first, looking at the existing infrastructure, here's a stormwater pipe here, there's one here, and there's one here. Now, in this middle part here, there are no stormwater pipes, but you might say, well, they could drain to there or here. But the fact is, this land actually slopes down this way. So whilst the people can get their roof water into the existing network, all the water that lands in the driveways or their land stays on their property or flows into the neighbour who's further down this way. And then you have ponding and overtopping gully traps and those things. So we've looked at this and said, well, what if we extend our stormwater network to include a new pipe here and a new pipe here? And let's do it cleverly. So if we do it here, it enables all these people here that have an extra place to connect the stormwater to. It also means that we can, by these sumps here, intercept surface flows. And we've located them specifically in depression areas. So unfortunately, it's not shown here, but there's a big depression area here. So that sump there will effectively take that water from the depression away. We've also looked at the overflow paths, and you can see here's an overflow path that goes down here, and we've strategically placed that sump on that overland flow path so we intercept those flows. And we've obviously ground-truthed that to make sure that is where the overland flow path is. And by doing that, we get rid of the water that's on the that's ponding and causing the inflow. So, as I said, that's the first cab off the rank. We have 19 other areas that we're busy investigating and doing designs for. We're actually doing the designs for them so that we can implement them this financial year. And we've located those focus areas because we know in those areas we can make a difference by having by extending the stormwater network and resolving the issue I described in the previous slide. And that's the work that we are doing this year to try and help the situation.
flows ceasing, like, you know, at the moment it happens to rains and people, but when will the heat come off us councillors? And I'm not talking about total, but would you suggest within 12 months things could be getting better? We might start to see an improvement.
I would say let's be patient. And I say it because it's a complex issue, and that's why we have a 10-year program of trying to solve this work here. It's going to be happening over 10 years, every year in new areas, trying to get this work done. But a lot of it relates to also the private property fixes, which are going to take a bit longer. Yeah, if you're looking at someone replacing the wastewater and stormwater laterals, that could, I mean, that's going to be a lot of money. That could be 5 years. It's very difficult to answer that.
Yes, I fully support Councillor Thompson's questioning, but it's more in regards to less about the pressure from the community, because we always get pressure from the community, but more about our affordability moving forward. Once we solve this, then it'll free up capital and for us to be able to do other things moving into the future. So absolutely support the sentiment.
Scenario, you're putting Matthews Road, Peroni Road there, where you're putting some pipes in there. Some of the private properties are going to have a lot more length to get into that system, so their costs are going to be considered more than other property owners. Is that going to be quite conflicting on how those decisions are made? Is that luck of the draw how far you are away from that pipeline? Because it's all on a per metre basis when you're doing this sort of stuff.
So through the chair, that is overland flow. We wouldn't be looking for most of those to pipe out to those new sumps that we've got there. The existing stormwater, the system that's out on the road there, is taking the downpipes at the moment. The sumps at the back are for everything that's coming off the garage and stuff that's not piped in. They wouldn't necessarily have to pipe to get it into those sumps that are there now.
It offers not an alternative area to locate into if they want to change the location, or if they have a problem with the current stormwater pipe and they want a new one, but they would still be able to, as Dave said, the roof, whatever, could still go to those existing pipes.
Okay. Given the picture, how much of that is our cost and how much of it is public, private cost?
So in terms of these projects, our cost is the public stormwater pipes, the dark or the bold green lines and the manholes. But the works on the private property that are the responsibility of private property owners is for their costs.
Supplement to that, Madam Chair. Do you have an indication of what the average cost per property would be?
So through the chair, we've estimated the total cost of fixes that are needed on private property across the region, and that was the $13 million figure that we used through the long-term plan. That's why you approved $540,000 per year for us to start some of those on-property fixes for low-hanging fruit like this here. So for this here will be tens of thousands to put in, not even that actually probably. That, the public? That project there, they can range.
It'll be less than 20.
Yeah. That there will drain over a dozen houses better than what we have now. So the benefit from that, rather than every single individual household doing a fix at a per cost of, and it can be anywhere from $2,000 to $8,000 depending on what the fixes are per property. This here fixes a multitude of properties in one go. It's similar to, I know most of you have been out to Tairawhiti Street and seen the fixes that have been done there to drain those properties. So it's doing projects like that, leaving the things like the stormwater and wastewater laterals until you've made decisions around how you're going to encourage or ensure that people comply with the notices that they get sent.
Any of supplementary, Chair? In any of this, have you had to serve an abatement notice to get work done?
Not yet.
I haven't, but I'm fairly new to this project. Getting close to the end. The budgets are in your paper. So I'm just going to carry on. And just to talk about the medium impact and low impact issues, those are the private laterals and the public pipes. We still need to address those, but whilst the high impact issues will help reduce some of those because they will have less infiltration, for us to achieve the level of service we've set as one overflow every 2 years as opposed to 4 per year, we still need to address those, but they're just seen as a lower priority because, like I showed you in the graph, the majority is from the inflow. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thanks for that. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Akuata-Brown.
Thank you so much, Wolf, for that. And we do appreciate all the work that goes into this space. It's not easy. My question is really other findings in the space of drainage. I lived in Kaiti most of my life, and I know it's been an area where drainage has been a huge issue for it. We often, as council, talk about the impact of water collection during drought season, all those frameworks. So I'm wondering, is there any space in the kind of strategic thinking of collecting that storm water as far as reservoir, that type of thing? Because I know the impacts of the drainage issue for Kaiti has had huge health impacts, rise in rheumatic fever, etc. So if we are looking strategically further down into a space of water is gold, we need to look out for it more often nowadays. So I just wonder, is this highlighted perhaps another way to collect the stormwater in storage space or future thinking? Because we've talked about homeowners or new homeowners putting in perhaps collection tanks, sorry. Yeah, so I just wondered if this has highlighted that space for this particular part of our region.
Through you, Madam Chair, we have a paper that's coming back to Council in the new year that's looking at private property tanks. So it was something that you tasked us with doing through the long-term plan. So that is on our work program.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, Madam Chair, look, I just wanted to make a comment around this project. It's been on the go for a long, long time, and it actually took some of us a while to work out that the DrainWise program wasn't really going to deal with private properties until this occasion now. And what has been occurring is as long as some of us have been on this council, is actually upgrading our own network of stormwater and wastewater. And for example, it says in the report here, there's 220 kilometres of wastewater pipes. Well, that's been worked on over the years, and people have been questioning, well, what's all these millions of dollars going towards? Well, that's what it's been going towards, upgrading our pipes. And I see there's still 14 kilometres to do, which is a heck of a lot, and why that's costing still more millions of dollars, even for council's network. So I raised a couple of meetings ago about, bringing the public on board with this, and we councillors didn't really understand the scope of this project until probably a few years ago, realising that there is two components to it. And I'm really encouraged that we are now getting onto the private property part, which is still going hand in hand with upgrading our own infrastructure, and that's going to be ongoing for some years yet, isn't it? And so, yes, it is a long-term project, and the question earlier, hoping that we might get some improvements within a couple of years, is just not realistic, because it is going to take many more years to sort this out, and really you're only starting to work on some components even on the private property. So let's keep the public informed about how all this is going. And over the years, when some of us have given up this job and left, we will look forward to seeing it from the other side of the table, improvements as the project rolls out. So I congratulate you, because to know how to fix it, you have to find what the problem is. And that's taken quite a long time to investigate all those individual properties. And that component has been really essential to knowing how to roll it out from here. But I'm saying, well done, and we're on the way to the next stage.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, I do notice around town quite a bit still of downpipes going straight to ground. I assume they were over top of soak pits. Is that a problem? Is that they legal and all okay still, or is that something that needs to be addressed as well?
So the worst issue obviously is down pipes going to gully traps, and that's illegal. Down pipes going to the ground is better, but still not complying with the building code. All the water needs to be piped to an approved outlet. So in the past, we may have served notice on people say, please disconnect your down pipe from your gully trap, and then those moved onto the ground. Now with the touch once approach, we're saying move it, but as part of the program, we also need to create the connection to the approved outlet. So that is ongoing. Where we are finding those direct connections, we are, however, separately asking them to be separated in the meantime, because they have the biggest impact.
So those ones that probably been there for 50 years or something, and most likely are over a soak pit, are they acceptable because there's a soak pit under it? I mean, the ones that are just shifted, sure.
Or a gully trap?
Soak pit, yeah.
Okay, so...
There used to be an acceptable solution years and years ago.
So soak pits, it really depends on the soils where you are. But even with good soils, they end up blinding eventually and not working, or someone paves over them, or whatever happens. So from an operational perspective, I'm dead against the use of soak pits. We should rather connect to an approved outlet, unless you really have dune sands. Yeah, soak pits have a raft of problems associated with them. They are still legal, and we are reviewing the stormwater, or we'll be producing a stormwater code of practice, and in that we might deal with that issue.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, just I'd like to congratulate you too at this stage. It's been a long process, and the journey has been quite intricate actually, and visiting different sites and seeing the different effects that the ponding has on properties and adjoining properties. But the other side of it as well is that our whole wastewater management program with our wastewater plant and the inland wetlands project everywhere is all connected, because at the end of the day, the less water that flows into our whole system, the easier it's going to be managed right at the end, and the less water we'll have for our wetlands and AUD and all that. So if everyone gets their head around the whole program drain-wise and how the downside effect is going to be for our whole future, it's all very connected. So it's really important that it's not just people realise what's coming from their home and actually start realising where it ends up as well. It's a very involved process, and the more awareness, the better, and people will be more understanding and helpful to assist, I'm sure.
If we don't have any other discussions, it's a noting report. I'm happy to move it. Seconded by Councillor Petit. Thank you for the presentation and answering the questions. All in favour? Contrary, carried. We move on to page 71, the Cook Landing site, 1,000-year walkway bridge, and the CEO will speak to that. Thank you.
So through the chair, the paper draws the committee's attention to risk that the project team have identified, given the timeframes that we're working against to try and get the bridge in place. It is not my intention to bring a report for decision to the Finance and Audit Committee, for the reason that what it's highlighting is that there's a 20% cost variation if we order steel now. So that is still working within the current budget, but it's alerting you to a risk that there's 20% variation. So on that basis, I feel that it's not a decision required of the Finance Committee at that point. The major significant risk that we have is that when the detailed designs and costings come through, that is completely out of the ballpark in terms of the cost estimates and the funding that we have available. At that point, there would need to be a decision around go or no go, and we would have to look for options around reuse of the steel or request extension of timeframe from our funders.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Thompson, just your microphone.
Yeah, now the point I was sort of getting to before with regard to the upgrade of the white power flood control scheme was that we could end up putting work back because of cost if we don't. It's a risk. now we've got this project here, which has identified a risk. We've got a review of wastewater upgrade, which is going to be a risk. And the very next paper, not quite, is about the aquatic centre, which we referred to risks. Now, every single one of these is quite a, they have a relatively, or that what could be possibly a high degree of risk. And we're, our 10-year plan at the moment, we're looking at 8% per year, the ratepayers, which is at the top end of where you want to be. And I know that we really struggle to get to that 8%, you know, ethically for the people who are having to pay it. And over 10 years, that's a 100% increase by the time you get incremental percentage increase on percentage increase. So that's, we're basically increasing the rates by 100% over the next 10 years, anyhow, without any possible risk, without the flood control scheme having to be reviewed because of cost-wise, without the wastewater being moved forward, without anything going wrong on a Cook Landing site project, and without a risk to our budgets on aquatic centre. So I think when we're looking at risk, we can't look at each paper in isolation, because one paper in isolation, when we look at a risk, you might say, well, that's possibly a risk worth taking. But when you look at our risks over what we've got planned in the next wee while, we have to think very seriously about where this could go with regard to costs and implication of rates on our people. And so, I'm happy to move the report. We're noting the content of the report. I'm happy to move it at this stage, but it's something we have to be aware of. Otherwise, we've got some big risks involved, and there'll be some, there'll be some. We can't just decide at the end of it when the budget comes out and it's over. Oh well, we'll just have to do it. We've had to do that with the library and all those other ones that we've had to add extras to, and we could end up in a position we don't want to be in.
Through Madam Chair, just a reminder that in this particular project, it's all fully grant funded at this stage. So we would come back to, if the risk was such, Councillor Thompson, that it looked like the grant funding would not cover that, and we are unable to secure any further grant funding, then it would be a decision to pull plug on the project.
Correct, and I totally appreciate that, but the risk basically of a big overspend, if there is no extra grant funding added, is our risk. So that's the point I'm making.
So you moved the paper?
You
have moved the paper. Seconded by Councillor McLean. Councillor Cranston and then Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, I mean, for quite a while now, a few of us have been talking about meeting those timelines, which is getting quite problematic. The big risk here is having so many partners in this project. You've got DOC, iwi, Tairawhiti Roads, Port, NZTA, Heritage, and any one of those could throw a handbrake on the thing. So the work is to get everyone on the same timeline. We're really working to not put any handbrakes on. So I hope that work's going on. With there being so many partners, there isn't that risk I'm aware of. The contract is with council and the funder, but not any overruns. We wouldn't be vulnerable for any overruns if there were potential.
In terms of what the contract specs are,
yeah, if there were overruns,
no, we're not liable for any overruns in terms of that contract. That would be a decision that the council would have to make.
Yeah.
And I'll just, through Madam Chair, just in terms of responding to the partners, I think that is our absolute opportunity in terms of our working together, and has actually brought strength to the project going forward, that we're all on the same page, participating in steering groups and governance groups. So it's only strengthened and enhanced that relationship in terms of us also being able to unlock the other funding avenues. So it's very much front of mind in nurturing those relationships too.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was actually my question, really. It is our project, albeit it's fully funded externally. I'm just checking. And when the contract tenders come in, it would be us that would be meeting, unless other external funding can be sourced from somewhere. And is there a time frame? I see we're talking about 4 weeks. We'll have better information in 4 weeks. but I can't find in there, but I might have missed it, when it's going to be, when tenders are going to be called or the design's going to be complete.
Yes.
I would like to see a timeline.
Yes, we can provide that for you. And I guess to clarify, when this was written, the 50% design was due to be delivered on Friday, so that has definitely been received. We've lodged the tender documents, which was on Monday, so that 4 weeks is accurate, and we will get that further information then. So everything is on track at the time of writing.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I think it would be really helpful for accountability if we did see a timeline. And are you saying that tenders were lodged, so it was advertised and the tender process is on Monday? Thank you. With a 4 weeks closing time? Great. Thanks very much.
Okay, everyone.
So where are we at with this?
I might get our project manager to come forward and tell us that process from here. This is Greg Judd, he's our project manager.
No, thank you.
This is Greg Judd, he's our project manager for the bridge and Cook Landing site.
So we have to make the decision whether we do that steel procurement early or not. So where are we at with it?
Well, until we get engage a contractor and fabricator to do this bridge, we're not 100% sure exactly their methodology of procurement with steel. This is what we've been told from Navari, the options. It's pretty variable as far as what's available in New Zealand at the time that we need to order. Signals right now is that there's potentially steel available in New Zealand that we can procure. And the costs vary as well. Obviously, we've got the dollar as well as the steel price. So everything's sort of quite floaty until we lock someone down and they tell us this is how we want to do it, and these are decisions we have to make at that time. But we're probably sitting in those lines what we've been indicated.
The design is developed enough to know what we need to procure at this stage?
Yes, they're at a 50% design, and it's going to peer review this week.
Yeah.
And once they get past that, presumably there's no major changes, we can order, and they don't foresee any major alterations in the superstructure.
Foster and then Councillor Akawata Brown.
Have we, as our local contractors, are they capable of this project? Are they got the capacity to deliver a project like this?
On the bridge we're talking?
Yeah.
The bridge, there's only one contractor that could possibly do it here, and he hasn't at this point got the right qualifications, welding and methodology around fabrication. Right. He's going through that process, and he is looking at the tender documents, I know that, but whether he's going to meet the criteria come closing, we'll see.
Right.
Thank you. Councillor Akawata Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Judd. I just one question. Because what I love about the current work in our region is it's aspirational. It's fun. This project is huge, and because of, you know, as you say, you're still working through some of the, you know, technicalities around procurement steel. Is there any other help we can get through the national network that this project kind of, you know, is touching on in respect to Te Aha and Dame Jenny Shipley? I just, you know, because we are trying to set goals and a date, of course, for next year. And I just wondered, is there any framework of relationship in that space to help us out? I'm just, you know, networking here, but connections into that space, is that a helpful space, or that's just not a no-go zone?
Yeah, so I guess in that space, it's really around the financial and advocacy for the region in that space, and Greg, in terms of networks around accessing where the steel is in New Zealand, he's absolutely exploring all opportunities.
Councillor Thompson.
If we order the steel before the tenders come out at the other end, it's all very well you say coming back to council, but you're sort of coming back to council with our hands behind our back, because are we committed to that steel? Like,
we haven't committed to anything.
You won't commit to before a tender though? Is that
the tenders are out now?
Yeah.
And then we're receiving it more or less once we get someone on board. Then at that point, and quite quickly after we get them on board, we need to decide that this is the procurement method of steel we're going to use based on what they're going to give us.
But can we be sure that tender was only 50% of the design?
Well, we don't have time to wait for 100% design. If we wait till it's at 95% design, like SG normally would, it would be impossible to get this bridge finished.
So there
is a risk around that.
So through the chair, so that's, I mean, this is entirely the point is that this isn't about seeking permission to order the steel, it's flagging that this is a risk. We don't really have a choice in terms if we want the bridge to go ahead by next year, we have to actually go through this process of ordering the steel. The point at which we would need to determine is actually, is this cost escalation of the, once we get the design complete, going to be, you know, another 2 million on top, in which case that definitely is a decision around whether it's a go, no-go point for council.
Councillors.
Supplementary to that, and to just get an understanding here though, if we've ordered the steel and that occurs, is there some, will we have a comeback on that order?
Yeah, potentially there's always room to sell it, either have a lesser margin or the same, sometimes better dollar value. And Navarre have actually stated it's not the first bridge they've ordered steel at 50% design. They've been in similar situations and delivered. So,
okay. Last question, Councillor.
Thank you. This is really a question to council officers, to not fair to put on the project manager. If we've gone to tender with only 50% of the bridge design, aren't we leaving ourselves wide open for variations and what's the other technical word that applies when there are uncertainties around construction? Yes. Wide open. So why are we doing this, apart from the fact we want the bridge built by 2019? I mean, it's not good practice, is it? In a building construction.
I mean, it's not best practice at all. I mean, I get the issue we have is that we are pushing up against a time frame. It's quite a complex structure to build. David's waving his hand at me.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I may, the contractors are pricing against a schedule. It's not a fixed price that they're pricing to. So there's very little risk because of the way that they price for this. So the variations come as part of the work as you go through. So it's common practice in construction industry to appoint a partner to finalise the designs with, because they'll actually help with the buildability of it. There's no incentive for them to put variations because they've already got a fixed fee for as they come through, as they price against that schedule. So the risk is lower. If we were putting out a fixed fee price for a one-off build to build it now on 50% design, absolutely that would be very risky. But the way that the tender's being let, they're pricing against a schedule, so their margins are what wins it, as opposed to we can do it for this price.
Thanks for that. That in effect they are becoming part of the design team to complete the construction, so that to complete the design within there.
Absolutely, and this is where they can really add value with the practicalities of the construction. They can actually change spec or give alternatives to actually say, don't do it that way in Gisborne, we haven't got the gear or the cranes to try and keep that price down.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, but I want to reiterate though that it is 50% design once we've got detailed designs, where there is no certainty at this stage that the budget that we have currently got from the Provincial Growth Fund is actually going to cover what comes back from our tenders. So that's the risk that's sitting in there.
So on page 71, it's a noting report. It was moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor McLean. All in favour, contrary, carried. We move on to page 78. It is the satellite monitoring potential. Mr. Beatty will talk to us about that. Welcome to the table. Moved by Councillor Seymour. I'll second it. Thank you, James.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief, much like the report. I think the key part is in the summary there, where effectively what we've uncovered and discovered is that the technology is just not mature enough to warrant any sort of further investigation. Officers will keep a watching brief. We're aware of a study that's actually just taken place in Australia, which in effect in the here and now backs up our current thinking anyways, but it's encouraging to see that around the world people are looking at this technology to be used for consent monitoring. largely the technology that is available to us is just too low res to offer us anything of any benefit beyond what we can already access within our own systems.
So I had one question. I assume you've been in contact with Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, we have had considerable contact with Mr. Hamilton. He came and met with us, and I've had several discussions with him. We also spoke to his counterpart, as the report highlights, from whom he got the original presentation and the original insights with. So we had a talk with Tim as well, and again, as the report notes, there is some information and technology available. The costs are quite prohibitive. I'm aware of a satellite that was launched this year, quantum spend $8 million US, and size probably could fill the third of this chambers. So, and that's offering up real high res imagery. It's not real time, it's still available sort of in a 4-week time frame.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Akuata Brown.
Thank you, James, and appreciate the maturity space of technology. And I guess just in noting that our Mayor and Councillor Dowsing are over at an IT conference in Ireland. So I guess will be interesting to hear what speaks come from that. So I just want to say thank you for, and obviously we appreciate when we have a deputation followed up, and you've spoke with the gentleman who brought that to our attention. So in the now, it just sits still waiting for, you know, for maturity's sakes, or is it just that just we as a council are not going to look further into this space at the now?
Yeah, we'll continue a watching brief like all local authorities in terms of this sort of technology. I think what I'm cognizant of is that there are bigger organisations with far more means that will probably access that technology before we do. So like MPI are not using, you haven't got any satellites up there in the stratosphere doing consent monitoring. So I think you'll probably find going forward will be a PPP arrangement that brings access to local government, potentially central government as well, to the extent that we'll be able to have some real-time imagery down to the level that can give us the sort of information we require for consent monitoring.
Thanks for that. So we've got a mover, Councillor Dunn.
I just want to be more specific than the Deputy Mayor. Has the Dougal Hamilton received this report?
Only in so much as it's gone through the agenda process. I haven't sent it to him specifically, but I can do. We're likely to have future conversations with him.
I just think it would be good practice to send him a copy. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Seymour moved it. I seconded it. All in favour? Contrary? Carried.
Project management process for the 1,000 members prior to us. So the person who referred to as our contract manager, I just want to know, are we contracted?
Thank you, Diane. Will give us that. Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not particularly sure what the question is or the information that you're after.
Is he employed by GDC to be the project manager, or is his company employed by GDC to be the project manager?
So,
and where do those costs fit?
So through you, Madam Chair, a few months back we went through a procurement process to engage project management services to Council to provide support across the Navigations program. So we've engaged Civil Project Solutions to provide that project management support. We currently have 2 project managers within the Civil Project Solutions company engaged with us to deliver that work.
That's what we need to know.
Okay, we move on to page 81, and I welcome Mr. White to the table. This is just an update on the Lawson Field upgrade, which is happening very far. You can see the progress daily. It's impressive. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. The Lawson Field Theatre project is one that I'm proud to say has been tracking really well, and it is highly visible, and people can see that it's tracking really well. So it's tracking well in terms of progress and in terms of budget. There's probably not a lot more for me to say to introduce the report than that, but also just to recognise again the efforts of the War Memorial Theatre Trust, which is chaired by Councillor Seymour, and our Deputy Mayor is also a member. They've been working really well around fundraising, and we do have a really productive relationship with them with this project, which has been extremely positive.
Any questions or discussions? All good.
As you can see the project developing daily, I'm happy to move the report.
I'm happy to second that. Any other discussion? Otherwise, I'll put it to the table. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Thank you, Mr. White. We move on to page 86, a very chunky report we have on the Olympic pool redevelopment project. It's you again, Mr. White. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I'd like to be able to give the same sort of summary to the Olympic pool complex project as I have just done for the Lawson Field project, I can't. The Olympic pool complex project is certainly a lot younger in terms of the work that we have done on it, not necessarily a lot younger in terms of the thinking that's been going on around Olympic pool complex, but in terms of our stage and delivery of the project, it's a very young project. So we've basically completed a concept which we have consulted on extensively with our community pre-LTP and post-LTP and through the LTP to arrive at a preferred concept that the community said that they liked. So, and Council has committed, as you know, a portion of the funds towards the estimated redevelopment cost of implementing that option. That percentage of funds is below the 1/3 typical funding percentage that external funders typically look for. However, in saying that, it is still a significant contribution of $5.65 million over the first 3 years of the LTP. So it would be fair to say that we have been fairly cautious since the community told us that they wished us to go through the process with this option. We have been cautious because we don't know what the likelihood of external funding for this project is at this point. We've been engaging in conversations with 2 of the 3 funders that we think are the likely significant funders for this project when it goes ahead. One of them is our Eastern Community Trust, who we would consider to be a cornerstone funder for this project as a local share. There is some other work going on with the Eastern Community Trust around the Memorandum of Understanding that Council's entered into it and how that looks in reality. So we are continuing to work with them without real certainty around whether the pool is going to be a top priority for them or not, but we are hopeful. Another of the funders is the New Zealand Community Trust, who we met with a couple of weeks ago as part of the Local Funders Forum, and they expressed that this is the sort of project that they do invest in. But they also said, you know, we're not the sort of organisation that will throw $10 million at a project of this kind, because that's not how we operate. It's typically sort of $1 to $2 million maybe a year for a project of this scale. And then the other funding organisation or fund that we would be hopeful to get significant support from is the Lottery Significant Projects Fund. And we actually haven't entered into discussion with them at this point, but we're working on putting together a pre-application to that fund, which should give us an indication of how well this fits with their agenda. So there's a whole lot of other stuff in this report. We've requested a peer review from New Zealand Recreation Association and Sport New Zealand, which they have provided. We requested that before the LTP. We received a response from New Zealand Recreation Association, which didn't give us a heck of a lot of clarity. Therefore, we requested a further assessment using that information from Sport New Zealand, which they provided. That raises a number of questions from the perspective of their view of needs versus our community's perspective of what they want. And you know, there's some fundamental things in there, some which can be implemented into our design process. There are some other things that are quite big, actually, when you're thinking about what aquatic facilities do you provide for a community, i.e., should we be providing a 50-metre pool? It's something we have historically provided. It's something that our community has an expectation of, which was clear through the consultation process, and it was supported by our reference group, which incidentally includes organisations such as Port Gisborne Tairawhiti, was supported by our steering group. We had a competent design consultant around aquatic facilities giving us direction on our approach. And that's why you'll see in the report, although it's a noting report, basically saying that we should continue with the process of option 3, which includes the 50-metre pool. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson first, then Councillor Cranston, then Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, Andrew, thanks for the report. I look back at looking at the aquatic centre, and a number of us have been through this process before. Councillor Cranston is one of them. And the last time, well, the first time we went through this process, we had the same discussion again around whether a 50-metre pool was wanted or whether a 25-metre pool seems more suitable for a community our size. And having lived in Hawke's Bay for some time, they had a 50-metre pool and they decommissioned it and are building a new aquatic centre there, and it's not going to be a 50-metre pool, it's going to be a 25-metre pool. And this is one of the issues, and having had a peer review that's come up with, yes, well, we don't recommend a 50-metre pool, a 25-metre pool, plus these other activities would more suit what your organisation wants. And of course, we've gone through a process and we took the 50-metre pool as preferred option to our 10-year plan consultation. But it still worries me, and I still think in the back of my mind that this is not what the experts say we should need. It's more that the community's got a 50-metre pool and nobody likes to lose what they already have. If anything, they just want an enhanced version of what they've got or a replacement of what they got, but they feel that cutting back to a 25-metre pool is going to be a big step backwards. And that's the political thing that we're dealing with at the moment. And on top of this, we're seeing that it's going to be challenging to fund this project, which has been priced out of what, 28 million or whatever. It's going to be the most significant community facilities project we've done for many, many years. So I hesitate to carry on promoting only one option when all the experts point towards a different option. And it's a political component that is actually keeping us on track to option 3. And interesting that, of course, some of us that were on that governance group are going to be disestablished, and I've got no problem with that because I totally support the Maven, was it Maven? Yeah, consultants that showed us a better way of doing things. And as I was one of the ones calling out for a review of how we roll out our projects, I could hardly argue against what they recommended. And so the governance group would actually encompass a number of experts on there. And if we had actually started from square one now, the preferred option might be actually different. And so that's what I raise as the issue now, that do we need to pause it? And under two things that are influencing us. One is the total cost and a lack of commitment with financial support for the level that we're seeking. And secondly, are we actually racing down a pathway that maybe would be different with a bit more thought about the project as a whole? Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the process got a little bit wrong because we went out to the community with an option and that option came back to us and everyone was all excited about it. And then we decided to have it peer reviewed. The peer review should have actually been before we put those options out. So unfortunately, when that peer review did come back, it had the advice that the 50-metre pool wasn't the best way to do this. And the basis for that was it's only catering to less than 6% of the population that are doing competitive swimming. I don't agree with that with the designs I have seen, because I mean it's still going to be a pool that it is separated into different components which will offer different activities. So I still think there's the reason that came forward was because it gave the option of retaining a 50-metre pool, but sort of addressing some of the concerns about having lots of activities going on down there. So I'm a little bit disappointed that we kind of got somewhere and then we're kind of going backwards. I mean, as Brian said, I mean, gee, I can think of 15 years where every time I see pool on the agenda, I think deja vu, because recommendations seem to go round and round and we seem to keep going back to the same place all the time. I think we need to get it to a initial stage that we are going to do. You know, it's going to have to be a staged operation because we're not going to be able to afford the full complexity of how that could be at the end. But we actually need to identify a stage that we can do something, because after a decade and a half of having these discussions going round and round in circles, having recommendations, more consultations, more discussions, we've actually got nowhere in those 15 or 16 years, absolutely nowhere. And it was one of the first things that happened when I came on council. We went around looking at pools and all that, and I was all excited. And I'm trying to maintain that excitement, but it's getting harder, I tell you. You know, but as far as, and there's real good models, like whenever I go to town, I do go to the pools and other centres and see what the options are. And I still believe that the option around the Blenheim facility down there is one that we've really got to focus on. And that's been very much a staged operation over 12, 15 years. They were in the same place as us, a pool that was breaking down. Now that facility down there is absolutely awesome. Lots of different activities. They got, you know, they've got a gym, they've got squash courts, they've got a subway, they've got a cafe, they've got 3 pools, they've got meeting rooms and all that. But it didn't all happen at once, because that would be an enormous economic strain and we wouldn't get there. But what they did is they've staged it over those times, and because of the staging, it's become possible to get them a facility that, gee, I wish we had, you know. And I don't know when we're going to get there, and I really want to not have recommendations that kind of get us nowhere. I want to have some recommendations that actually progress. They've got 4 pools down there. One's a lazy river, 2 are 25, and one's an external 25, 33 actually. They haven't got the 50-metre pool.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I'm the same actually. It's been certainly a dragged out process, taking a long time. I think the community has told us very strongly that they want us to get on with it. Obviously, we've got funding constraints, and now with the external peer review that's come through, it's probably put more uncertainty with our funders as well about the direction that we're taking with the 50-metre pool. But you know, at the end of the day, we've got to start. We've got to start somewhere, and I agree with the Maven report about a project steering group, because once that happens, then we'll start getting some good direction with all the different advice that we've had. And maybe option 3 might not be what comes out of it. Maybe option 2 actually had quite a lot of support as well as a preferred option when you saw it. So, you know, and I totally agree with Councillor Cranston. A staged approach really needs to be done. So we can identify, okay, we're going to do this. If it's going to be the 50-metre option or the 25-metre option, the roof, the whole, you know, we've got to do it so it's affordable and the funders can see, you know, prioritising what the first need is. Obviously, the complex needs to be secure, indoor, easily with administration and everything, and maybe like Councillor Cranston said again, the staged approach, totally like Blenheim, you know, and just getting one thing up and running first, because when you do that, things do start changing a little bit, you know, rather than having an overall picture at the end. If you get something started to start with, you know, there's something that could be added. That area down there lends itself to such greatness. It is an awesome area that is by the ocean, is really unique. There's no pool complex that's really so close to the ocean. So we've got a huge opportunity to make something uniquely Gisborne as well. And so I just think we really need to get on with it as fast as we can. And hopefully with that new project group, we can get some good options coming to us, because I don't mind seeing a couple of options in front of me rather than just having tunnel vision on one.
I have one question then, it will be Councillor Seymour. When I read the report, I wondered, why did we do the peer reviews? Why did we not do the peer reviews before we offered option 3 up? Why was it done afterwards? Because I would have thought that would have been better practice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if we look back in a little bit of hindsight around this project, this is the first year council has ever put any money into the pool project, ever. So yes, we've been talking about it for well over a decade, but council has never put any money in the game. And that's why we've got this wonderful opportunity now. The Chief Executive last year made the decision to actually fund the initial business case and concept design work within her delegation. So we had 1 year where we were working really hard with the steering group and the designer to pull together concepts that we could put out to the community through the long-term plan. We asked for the peer review prior to the end of last financial year. As I said before, we got the product from New Zealand Recreation Association that actually didn't give us any real clarity or certainty around what they thought. So then we asked Sport New Zealand to actually give some more certainty around that. So there are some reasons why we have, things haven't worked out in quite the order that we would have liked them to. But I often go back to thinking we are in such an early stage of this component of the project, broad concept design, in terms of how much we've invested in this project, that actually we're in the right space to be having these conversations. You would not be wanting to be having this conversation in a year's time when you're in detailed design. So yeah, we can talk about wider concepts, and multiple concepts, and which ones are the best, but actually at some point, to get to that detailed design work, council is going to have to make a decision about which concept it wants to go to. And I'm keen to do that as soon as possible, but you do have that big question there from some experts in the industry who think a certain way. We also have a designer who's an expert in the industry who has a different perspective on it. At the end of the day, it comes down to council and its community around where it wants to go with this.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. White. That, page 92 at 20 and 21, it actually does say that the Recreation Association report did not form a single conclusion. I think we went out to our community and we asked them what they wanted, and they told us they would like a 50-metre pool. And while these people in Sport New Zealand clearly are experts, this is our community. This community is quite isolated from the rest of New Zealand. And if it means that we do have to do this over a period of years, it is a facility that is going to be accessible to the community for the community, and they don't all get the opportunity to travel outside to use someone else's facility, apart from the young people that may be actually in the sports teams. So I haven't seen anything sufficient to tell me that not to support the 50-metre facility, and I just think that all the other comments have been made. We need to get on with progressing it for the benefit of the community, because all of my time here we've been talking about a swimming pool, but as Mr. White rightly points out, with no money put beside it. And other councillors around here talk about being ambitious. Well, let's be ambitious for the swimming pool complex and recognise that it could progress along that waterfront. There's plenty of space over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Wharehinga, then Councillor Akuhata-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the sentiments that we need to start.
Just one discussion, please.
I also agree that that we do need to stage this out. The community did let us know through the LTP process about what their preferred option was, and we do need to keep that in front of us in principle. We need to stage our work plan to live within our financial means at the moment. What we're kind of neglecting to talk about too is that there is far more in common in regards to the peer review process with our recommendation as well. They all have things like better indoor facilities, better indoor, outdoor pool flow, all of these kinds of things. So there's a lot of things in common where the peer review actually supports our work program moving forward. So I think those are actually the takeaways that we can, those are the things we can take away from those peer reviews and actually probably implement those things first, you know, in regards to our stage approach. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. Yes, there is a discrepancy, there's a difference of opinion in regards to the 50-metre pool, but that's like 6% of the overall peer review kind of feedback. There are a lot of principle-based things that they agree with, better toilet and shower facilities, getting people from them into the pool, dining area, learn to swim area, all of those kinds of things actually have some commonality with where we're heading to first, heading to in our LTP. So we need to start getting into those things first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Akawaka-Brown.
My only added to this discussion is simply to say thank you for the very in-depth, thorough report we have before us, major detail in there. But is one of the attributes of this community is its generosity. And when I look at a number of projects that have come to fruition over the years in a wide spread of our region, I think of the softball diamond happening, the turf, etc., is that we have a lot of philanthropy type peeps who like to give towards projects like this. And I wanted to know whether that has been a consideration, as we've seen with the Lawson Field and the War Memorial, you know, people wanting to gift money basis. And in a lot of other parts of our region, we've had these groups, you know, who would like to put money into. So in the discussions, has that been an option? I mean, I know there's the sell the brick, when you take something down, kind of have your name on a plaque type thing. But we do have a lot of people who obviously support this project. The feedback from the WTF was hugely supportive of this infrastructure. You've heard everyone around the table say we are aspirational and hopeful, but with collecting of funds, has that been an option to consider fundraising from a community perspective for this project?
Thank you for that, Councillor. I'm aware that quite often my responses to you are just yes, or every once in a while no, so I'll elaborate a little bit more. I think that's a really important part to any community project, and we've been, as you say, we've been really successful in the past, and we've just been talking about the Lawson Field Theatre. We're often successful through partnerships with organisations such as the War Memorial Theatre Trust or the Wainui Lions for the Junior Bike Park, or directly with our community. So yes, it has to be a part of this project as well, and we'll add some capital to the project. I think one thing that Council just needs to keep in the back of its mind with this project, and Councillor Wilson talked about it before, this is our biggest value community project that we have embarked on for many years, or maybe even forever. And so we're going to have to draw from a whole bunch of different areas. The contribution from some of those areas will be small, and it will be for a certain aspect, but it's all part of the picture.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember coming to this district about 40 odd years ago, and the highlights on the arrival was the opening of the new Olympic pool, and it was absolutely sensational. Well, over 40 years, like anything like ourselves, we deteriorate, and we need repairing, and the state of our pool right now is the fact that it needs repairing and it's losing customers and the likes. I support Councillor Seymour in the sense that our community is telling us what we want, and I support option 3, and I support a 50-metre pool. We've already got a 25-metre pool. If you don't like the 50-metre pool, go and use the 25-metre pool. And when you use both, I mean, if you like your swimming, the 25-metre pool is a bit of a shambles sometimes because it's really hard to get a good 25 metres in. Whereas opposed to a 50-metre pool, you can also cut that with a balustrade and use a lot, you've got a lot more opportunity to a lot more things as opposed to the 25. So we need to listen to our local community. I respect the peer review, but they don't live locally. Let's go and try and keep our community happy and stick with that 50-metre pool. Thank you.
Burdette.
very good, detailed report. The first one, and positive one in 10 years. We normally see in council agendas costs for maintenance on the old pool. When I first came into council, and good on Councillor Wilson, he's been the driving force to make things happen. When I first came in, it was $12 million. It was costed at that. And we put it on the back burner for 10 years. For 10 years. It's iconic in this city, the Olympic pool. And I've often wondered why the city fathers, being ourselves, haven't pursued to getting it upgraded or a new one. So well done. Carry on the good work.
Thank you, Councillor Bedette.
The 50-metre one.
Any other discussions? So Councillor Dunn has moved the recommendations as they stand on page 87. So I'm just going to go through them, that everyone is very clear on what we are voting on, and then it was seconded by Councillor Akawata Brown. So A, that the redevelopment project is a high-risk project for council, largely because of the high capital cost and uncertainty of funding. B, that significant design and diligence work is required to be completed in order to attract the external funding to implement the project. C, that the current project steering group will be disestablished and reconstituted in line with the Maven project management recommendations. D, that external peer reviews of the concept options undertaken by the NZRA and Sport New Zealand have raised questions about design elements, including the need for a 50-metre pool. And lastly, E, that the long-term plan adopted option 3 remains the preferred option to progress, principally because of the overwhelming support evidenced through community consultation.
Does that exclude,
microphone?
Does that exclude having a look at where we could go possibly? Like obviously we've got pressure from funders and that, and I'm looking at say D&E. If we support that now, are we actually re-locking it in, or are we saying that's where we're at the moment? But we can have a look at, like there's been some speakers how we might need to do a stage thing, which might mean we need to rejig the design a bit to fit a stage thing in. So I'm just saying, does D&E re-lock it in, or is that just saying that's where it is at the moment and we can have a look at it?
Just wait, he's just going to answer.
I think that's a good question, and we're talking about council's preferred option and progressing with the planning for council's preferred option. And actually in the report, we do talk about, and I really like what Councillor Wharehinga said before, because there's a lot of synergy and a lot of positivity between council's approach and what Sport New Zealand has actually said, and also what New Zealand Recreation Association has actually said. There are things that we can take from those peer reviews that actually improve what we have come up with. You know, the 50-metre pool is one thing, and that's easy to focus on, but there are many, many other items within those reports that actually add value to our process. So yes, keep all of that in consideration as we go through the planning process, and also in terms of phasing, this has always been a phased project. First 3 years of phasing, and then the second major phase is the outdoor work in 2026, 2027, I think.
So, supplementary, could we put an answer there which sort of just makes it clear that we will look at, we could look at in conjunction with our funders how we might sort of be able to make this more affordable or more feasible, because we don't want to get down the way and find that we just haven't got the money again and have to stop it again. We can stop it feasible, otherwise we're wasting our time here. We just come back another 10 years and say we still haven't got it because it's not feasible. So I'm thinking we need an F at the end of there, just to remind us that we are open to some, so we've got some script writer here who can come up with another F just to remind us that there is a possibility we will have, and in conjunction with the main report process, and possibly we need to get our funders involved also, because as Larry pointed out, this puts pressure on funding.
So it is, it's just a noting report, but we can add a if in there. I just am not sure what wording you would like to add.
So has it had a movement in a second?
So it was moved by Councillor Dunn and seconded by Councillor Akwaha Brown.
So we can take on board that, Councillor Thompson, we can capture that in the minutes that staff will work alongside funders to make it feasible. And funders and partners.
So, Councillor Seymour.
I hear what's being said, but I just want to endorse comments made earlier about Lottery Grants Board. Now, it's a very substantial community facility for a community that is not of a high decile. And honestly, I think they should be asked for something like 10 million or 12 million. It is a very big project. We haven't gone to them for big dollars. They've contributed smaller dollars to some of our projects, but it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. So they've got time to think it through, as some other funders in this town do, plan what they are going to, where their big donations are going to go. And I think we should be quite ambitious in the application that we make to the lotteries, community facilities, and work really hard to secure a large sum of money from them.
So what we are in effect saying on page 87 is that even though we have received some peer reviews that might not be 100% in line with the 50-metre plans that we had, that we are saying again, yes, we will be sticking to our option 3 going forward. So that is just confirming to the community, even though there were some external peer reviews, after our community consultation, council is still committed to what we said we would do, and it will be phased, as Councillor Thompson alluded to. It was always phased.
So through Madam Chair, just in terms of that, so the report is a noting report, and those are the particular matters in the report that we wanted you to note. The issue around, anyway, if you had decided to move from your option 3 to option 2, one is one that would be considered substantive in terms of its nature, and so not only would you have to resolve to overturn your previous decision, we would have to go through an engagement process. That option's open for you. At this stage, it was really around noting that there is peer review that's been done. You have resolved to that through your LTP. Should you so choose to revisit that, that's another process that we would have to go through.
Councillor Thompson, one last question from you, because I can see you want to ask.
Yeah, if we suggested that we would consider variations to the option 3, but keep it in line with the general concept of option 3, and that's, as you said, there's a lot of bits and pieces in there that you could just jig a bit to get the price down. So while we could suggest that option 3 remains a focus where we're at, but would consider variations within that option to enable forward progress. How would that?
It doesn't preclude.
Yeah, I think that is included anyway. Yeah. Overall, I think there is still scope to move in option 3. Mr. White?
I don't disagree with what the councillor is saying, but remember, we're in the early concept stage with broad elements. I was asked the other day to confirm what sort of water treatment we were going to be doing with the pool, and my response was, well, we're in the concept phase. When you're in the concept phase, there's a lot of refinement through developed design and detailed design to get to the point where you actually truly know what you're going to be doing with the different elements. So just keep it in the back of your minds where we are in this process.
Okay, I take you back to page 87. It was moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Akwaha Brown. All in favour, contrary, carried. We now move to page 230. Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you, Robson. Page 230 is just a noting report on how the major projects reports would now be coming to future Tairawhiti. Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Fenn. All in favour, contrary, carried. So we will, can we do that Wainui workshop now for 25 minutes before lunch or not? Heather, can we do the Wainui workshop now before lunch? Yeah, but can we do it before the meeting, before lunch?
Lunch is all there.
But that's public excluded. It's public excluded. So we're going to go into, just before, I just want to clarify stuff before we, so are we going to have both our workshops in public excluded? Okay. So then we're going to move into public excluded, moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Finn, all in favour. Good. I'm just going to go to the bathroom. Oh, sorry, you were asking me a question. Yeah.